I like that analogy. What she's basically saying is, don't fight this guy on guitar because you're going to lose. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was interesting what you said about your approach to time being tied to normal speech patterns. Your playing doesn't have to fit a particular time signature. If you want to add a beat or lose one, go ahead. Don't confine yourself to established practices. That's interesting thought to have, because how weird would it be if we all spoke in perfect measures, or if we said everything in haiku or something? So if you can speak with any rhythm you want, you should be able to play that way too. Did she get that right? Did Chad have that right?
Yeah, but also Frank had said that also. He said you don't speak in 4/4.
Tell me about your new album. Yeah, I guess it would be.
Yeah,
eh,
pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfectly logical, actually. But
Yeah, it is when you actually stop and think about it, but many people probably don't. Of course, in progressive rock, there are a lot of riffs that are built on odd time signatures, But in terms of soloing, I guess as long as the other players are really listening carefully, because Jennifer made that point about not knowing where the one is, as long as the guys on stage have a basic idea, I guess. She also mentioned that technique that sounds like a whammy bar, but it's done with the fingers. Do you know what she was referring to?
I know exactly what she's referring to, yeah. It's just when you grab the string, if you pull the string from below the fret before you fret it and push towards the bridge, the note will be very sharp. And likewise, if you're going to say, just like say playing an A on the E string, and you grab it from above, when your finger lands on the note you want to play, if you pull it towards the nut, it'll be really flat. So you can get it to move actually, if you get good at it, you can actually stretch it a tone. I don't know that I've ever been able to do more than that, but usually a half step.
That's
in
interesting.
either direction.
Well, that's why I reached out to these other players, because they have stuff on the brain that's not on my brain. So I'm glad she was able to contribute that. Well, I have a feeling you're going to enjoy this next clip. Let's spin it.
Hey, Dan Miles, this is Carl Jaw from Atlanta, Georgia. When you told me that Allan Holdsworth is going to have a 12 CD box set released, my first thought was, man, that's a lot of notes. A lot of notes. If I had a penny for all the notes on that collection, I'd be a wealthy man. But seriously, folks, no, Allan Holdsworth's a master brewer. The man likes to make beer. What is this, a roast? That concludes the comedy portion of our show. I'm here Mondays and Thursdays. Try the veal. The name Allan Holdsworth first blipped on my radar when a friend brought an album to my house. He says, you got to hear this guitar player. I've never heard anything like it. It was called Bundles by a band called Soft Machine. And they were a progressive English band. And it was groundbreaking. The highest compliment you can play any musician is that they're original. And this was very original. It sounded like a crazy saxophone, and the tone was amazing. And we're like, how does he play like that? What is this? So we followed Allan Holdsworth. I got Velvet Darkness. I still have a vinyl copy of Velvet Darkness, as well as having a vinyl copy of Metal Fatigue. Metal Fatigue was an album that I think a lot of people embraced. It had a lot of rock overtones, and he got on a lot of people's radar, I think, with that album. But I've pretty much heard everything, and it's all great. It all is original and brings something different to the table every time. I got to see Allan Holdsworth play twice. Early on, I saw IOU play at the Roxy Theater. Jeff Berlin on bass, Chad Wackerman on drums. And man, a lot of noise coming off that stage for three guys. It was pretty amazing. And years later, I saw him at the Coach House down in San Juan Capistrano. Gary Husband was on drums. I can't remember the rest of the band, but again, equally amazing show. And I actually met Allan Holdsworth one time around 1990, 91. Dred Zeppelin was touring England, and we were at this rehearsal studio, playing in the studio for like a press, recording it and interviewing the band. So I went to this little corner coffee clutch little thing to get a cup of coffee on the floor we were at. And who's standing there but Allan Holdsworth? So I introduced myself to him, and we chatted a bit. He was there rehearsing with Level 42. He did a tour with them, I think maybe an album even. And very nice guy, very personable, always ready to talk about guitars. And just had a little brief chat, and he was off. But he was very friendly and seemed like a real nice guy. So those are a few of the bright Allan Holdsworth moments in my life. I just want to say, Allan, you've inspired many people, many guitar players, many musicians. 12 CDs is an amazing accomplishment. I wish you many more, and I hoist my glass in your direction. Cheers.
The one and only Carl Jha.
Oh, that's awesome. That's funny.
And when Carl sent me his audio clip, he also sent me a picture of you guys together. Must have been that Level 42 event he was talking about. Another aspect of your work that probably isn't mentioned enough is your sense of humor, which can often be found in your song titles. And more importantly, I often detect a sense of whimsy in your soloing. Humor is obviously an important tool just to get us through life in general. But in terms of musicianship, how important do you think it is to incorporate some humor now and then?
I think it's very important, actually. Because it's like if you look at life you have to find something. You have to try to find something fun in it, to make it to ease the pain. It's just most of the musicians that I've worked with have a fantastic sense of humor. They're all usually very, very funny guys. Mm-hmm. Chad has got one of the driest wits of all. He's very funny.
I think it relates to intelligence, and playing the type of music you do. You're not going to have a lot of dummies playing bass and drums in your band. So it seems like it would go hand in hand, that they would be smart and funny and talented.
Well, I've been extremely lucky in that department. I've most everybody that I've played with, I think, in the keyboards, bass, drummers are actually some of the most amazing musicians around. And it's been my pleasure to work with all of them. And most everybody that I've worked with had their kind of own personality and their own, they all bring something really different to the table, and I really enjoy that. I like to incorporate that in the music, where I'm not very strict in terms of interpretation. If they want to interpret it for themselves, I let them do that, because I think that that's a good thing. It makes them kind of find their way through the music, and then hopefully make it more enjoyable than try to tell somebody, well, you do this here and you do that there. I tend to let them make their own rules, so long as they're playing the music, which they all do, they can interpret it in different ways. One example is I did a track with Gary Husband and Jimmy Johnson, and which actually was never released. And then I did the same song again with Joel Taylor and Ernest Tibbs, which is still unreleased. But I was going to put them both on the same record, because they sound, with the exception of being able to recognize the melody and the actual composition, the interpretation is completely different. It's just like two different universes, and I love that. I really like that. I like to let the guys kind of find themselves, and that inspires me too, because it pushes me into evolve what I'm doing and put it in their interpretation, as opposed to trying to force a direction, if you know what I mean.
I know exactly what you mean, and a lot of the guests we've had on this show have been professional studio players. And they will show up for a job, and it can go either of those two ways. They can be told, all right, play what's on that sheet music and do not bring yourself to it at all. Or they can be given, the freedom to really contribute. And you would think that's what you would want if Lee Sklar comes in, or Jay Graydon, or Elliot Randall, or some player who's in the studio all the time. Let them contribute, like you just said. And they said, yeah, you'd think so, but you'd be surprised how often you get in there and they give you something that anybody could have played. They're not putting their personal stamp on it at all, which seems kind of crazy to me. It's like, take advantage of the talent, you're paying for it.
Yeah, you would think so. I did a few session things. Sometimes I go like, well, why did you ask me to do this? It's like anybody could have done it, But if they don't want you to be yourself, then what's the point,
I hear you, man. Well, one thing that I can't remember which guest mentioned this to me, but he said there was a time, probably in the 70s, when the record companies wanted just to have lots of names in the liner notes. So instead of just getting one rhythm section, they would have a different bass player and a different drummer, the biggest names they could get. So you'd have Russ Kunkel on this one, but you'd have Jeff Porcaro on that one. And they just liked having lots of names. And then, of course, the album is less cohesive when you do that, obviously. But speaking of humor and you, from in my own experiences, I found this kind of humorous and ironic, back in the day, because I used to tell people that I suspected you were a time traveler because whenever I watched you play, I felt like I was looking into the future. And then you came out with this album called The Tavacron, where you're wearing a Star Trek uniform on the cover and standing in front of a time portal. And I thought, hey, maybe my theory's not so far-fetched after all.
Except I was going the wrong way. I was going back into the past.
Right. It was just funny because I had been making that joke about you, watching you play, looking to the future, etc., before A Tavacron came out. And so after A Tavacron came out, it was a little bit too eerie. I didn't want to make that joke anymore.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, but as an example of your musical humor, I'm going to play a track that both Joel and Carl mentioned, the title track from Metal Fatigue, which on the surface appears to be a bit of a dig at metal guitarists. So were you trying to sort of gently chide them for the repetitive nature?
Oh, no. It was just a play on words, really. No, it didn't have anything to do with that at all, really. It was just that when I was writing that song, it kind of reminded me of and then when I'd worked with Paul Williams, and I originally used to write some lyrics of my own, but then I decided that it seemed to give the vocalist the freedom also to make sense out of the lyrics for themselves.
Yeah,
I would let Paul come up with his own lyrics, so. And he just hadn't put that in there, so it just became heavy metal fatigue. But it wasn't a dig at all, not at all. I mean, there's so many great metal guitar players. I thought it was kind of fun experimenting with the pitch shifting and all that stuff, which I've experimented with a lot. And so it was basically that. I was just kind of having fun.
Yeah. As I said, I'm glad you clarified that because your playing on that track is really wild. And then combining the lyrical thing, because I can tell you as a guy who was kind of traveling in the circle of metal musicians when that came out, I can tell you no metal guitar players were offended. So even if that was your intention.
Well, it wasn't intended to be that way at all. It was just, it was like I said, it was just fun. We were just having fun, and it just came up as quite often I'll have an idea of what the piece of music's going to be, and the title often will be based around. I'll write the piece of music based around the idea that I have for that particular title. But in that case, it wasn't. It was just something that grew out of it. It's like the album when we did the album Hard Hat Area with Schoolie Spurrison on bass and Gary Husband and Steve Hunt on keyboards. One of the things after the show, Schoolie came up to me and he goes, "Hey man, did you see all the people in the front row?" He said, "They looked like we needed to be handing out hard hats."
Oh.
So again, it was funny because he's another very, very funny guy.
Yeah.
And then I just came up with a title for the album, Hard Hat Area, But it was not a put down in any way. It was just a humorous, it was just humor, really.
Yeah, well, that's why we were talking about humor, and that's a good example of it. And, no matter what the intention, I think we can all agree that the result was pretty badass. So let's go ahead and enjoy the remastered version of Metal Fatigue.